I've never read this little chapter before, and it is Lucius, and Noreen, you were quite right. Lucius is a way stands in for me. I went around and did a great deal of research, tried to meet people who tell me things. And I interviewed, I think, everybody over 90 in Southwest Florida at one time or another. Unfortunately, almost all my informants went to their reward before they got to read the book, but I depended on that. And I actually went and finally found a descendant of Leslie Cox. Leslie Cox is the real villain of the book. Leslie Cox was a very dangerous, bad guy. He was a real natural-born killer. He liked to kill. I think we don't know whether Watson killed him, or I have another, nobody knows. He vanished. Leslie vanished. But his family, after he did so much killing up around Fort White, the family was sort of hated out and finally burned out of Columbia County, where they all lived. Watson did too. They were just driven out. And they went to a place called Alachua County. I don't know if you know backcountry Florida, but Alachua is a pretty spare, barren place, and it's pretty much thorn and cactus and what. And this is where the Cox family ended up. And I finally got to Alachua. I wanted to, and I talked to one of the old Coxes. And I want you to hear this guy, because unlike the Watson family and all the cousins in Fort White right up the line, who were prim and, Watson was the shadow cousin. They didn't want to talk about him. It's a real big scandal. If your uncle gets shot 33 bullets worth and this and that, it's the old family, that was pretty rough. The Coxes, as you will see, don't feel that way in the least. Au contraire. So, they're quintessential rednecks. South of Fort White, Lucius followed the old country road across the worn-out cattle range of the Alachua Prairie. The pothole road passed a humble church with a few poor habitations, and then a few poor habitations patched into the scrub edge. Will Cox, winding down his days in a blue shack surrounded by junk autos, stood in his narrow doorway with his hat on. "Next time you might find my grave, you won't find me," he sang out cheerfully, as if the stranger had turned up late on a long-awaited visit. Paying no heed, Lucius got out. He crossed the yard with heavy, bony steps and climbed into the back seat. "Been a while since I've seen where I'm headed for," Mr. Cox said. "Let's go have us a look." The little church back up the road had been founded by Will Cox after his family had been hated out of the Fort White district. He mentioned the exile without bitterness, far less self-pity. Lucius helped the failing man out of the car. His second Adventist church consisted of one white room with an upright mail-order piano and a small, narrow pulpit. The unfenced yard outside was bare, hard clay, haired lightly by sparse weeds. No bird call brought the hot scrub wood to life. No color refreshed the petals of the artificial flowers and the rusted wire holders at the graves. "Be here for good before you know it," Will Cox declared, gazing around with satisfaction. "I'm just ate up with cancer, so they tell me." Cox shuffled forward, removed his old felt, and pointed a proud, trembling finger at twin stones 10 inches high and barely wide enough to carry the small initials. "WWC, that's William W. Cox, only I ain't in there yet. And CFC, that's Cornelia Cox. She's down in there right now, bless her heart. Before she knows it, she'll be laying beside her darling, same as she always done." Will Cox contemplated his wife's grave. A toppled jam jar lay behind the stone. "Been aiming to get me and Ma a big old tombstone, but I've been down sick for about 10 years and never got to it." Asked if he had seen Leslie in recent years. That's the bad son. Mr. Cox said, "My boy Leslie Cox weren't as scared of nobody." He glanced behind him in case Les might have turned up at last out on the road. When Lucius pressed him, had his son ever returned? He shook his head. If Les ever come back, folks would have noted, because Les had a scar right to his ear where that mule kicked him, laid him out stone cold. We thought that boy would never sit up again. And when he did, his mama seen into his eyes and whispered, kind of funny, "This here ain't the same boy no more as we have knew." Out of respect for his loved ones, he took his hat off and put it on again, and stood a while, hands folded simply on his breast. Had a big picture of us up on the wall before our neighbors burned us out, and we come here. Him and his wife May, they was both up there. Burned us down to nothing. Les weren't a bad boy the way they say. Went to church regular, done his lessons, got to be a star pitcher on the ball club. Folks thought the world of Les. Never had no trouble before Watson came. Saying this, the old man gave his visitor a hard, sharp look. "You're a Watson, I reckon." When Lucius nodded, "You did too. We've been waiting on you." When he did not explain this, Lucius caught a fleeting scent of backwoods menace, like the quick, sharp musk of mink on a night road. "Let me know if you get tired, Mr. Cox," he said. "I stay tired," the old man said, holding his eye. But in a moment, his attention wandered. "Now that is a thing I wouldn't hardly know," he muttered, responding to some inquiry in his own head. "That was way back yonder, long, long time ago. Ed Watson warned me, 'Listen, Will, them Tolan skunks raise hell with croppers, so you got to go along with them somewhat.' And I says, 'No, sir, Ed, I don't got to go along with nobody if they don't do right.' Along about that time, Sam Tolan showed up at our fence, told me what I could do and could not do, carried on like he owned the county. Our rent was settled, but Tolan claimed there was more land than he figured, so he needed more money. I told him, 'Mister, have it surveyed out, and if I owe more money, I'll find it some way.' Cox shook his head. 'No, sir, we wasn't looking for no trouble. The Tolans brought it, and my boy Les took care of it.'" I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Where it started, Jim Tolan told Ma's sister, no, Jim Tolan done Ma's sister wrong. So Ma swore a feud against all Tolans. Knowing I don't hold with blood feuds, and the Frelick boys being all killed off or in the pen, she went and mentioned to her oldest boy how he had to revenge poor sister's honor, being as how she was fresh out of brothers. My boy went to Watson for advice. Was Mr. Cox saying that his son dealt with both those Tolans? In the history of Ed Watson was prosecuted for the murder of one Tolan and Leslie Cox, the other Tolan brother. But Mr. Cox thinks that was giving Mr. Watson too much credit. His son dealt with both those Tolans. Will Cox lifted his felt hat and scratched his scalp before he nodded. I reckon it might have been Les who done both. The direct question had not bothered him, since unlike the Collins clan, so proud and prim, the Coxes were unashamed and unequivocal. Whatever Leslie might have done, he was their blood, and for better or worse, had stood up for his family. Had he never believed Ed Watson was involved? The old man frowned. "I thought a lot of E.J. Watson, had a very high opinion of that man, but I never heard Leslie give him any credit." Sorry about that. Just for that. He pulled his ear. "Judge sent my boy to jail for life after that nigger trouble. Had to run off from the rail gang. The guards never tried to catch him?" "No, sir, not so as you notice." Will Cox almost smiled. "Our boy come home, worked in our field the same as always. And then some fool seen Leslie in the field, told Will Dick Purvis, 'That boy's up to Cox's sheriff, better go get him.' So let's hid up under the roof when Purvis come. Will Dick never tried to hunt him, just sung out, 'Well, if I was Les, I'd sure head out for other parts, because if he gets caught in this neck of the woods, folks just might hang him.' So the judge had no business sending Leslie to prison for killing that black family. That's the way the sheriff saw it." Cox squinted at him hard. That's the way everybody sees it, mister. He set his hat straight. Anyways, Les got sick of hiding, stayed to help with the spring plant, and then told us all goodbye for now. Take care of May, see you soon. Went on south to 1,000 Islands, and that was the last he was ever known about, except in hearsays. Feller generally told the truth, claimed he'd run across Les down around the coast someplace, said, I'm your cousin. Said Les told him, well, that don't mean that if you ever say you see me, I won't shoot you. Will Cox squinted. Some said it was Watson done for Les. I said, you talking about E.J. Watson? Shit, no. I said, E.J. was my good old friend. He never done no such a thing. Will Cox towed the clay soil with his broken shoe. We heard it was a nigger man killed at Watson. That was Henry Sharp. We heard it was a nigger man killed Watson. Heard Ed's own boys never raised a hand to set that right. He studied Lucius. Which boy was you? I'm Lucius, Mr. Cox. Times must have changed some when I weren't looking, Lucius. Wilcox spat tobacco juice, turned back toward the road. Me and my younger boys, we was fixing to go south to Watson's, find out what they'd done with Les. Hunt up that nigger too while we was at it. But like I say, I've been down sick and never got to it. He spread his hands in the hot sun, and both men watched them shake. Don't look like I'm ever going to get there. What do you think? No, sir, Lucius murmured gently. I don't think you are. Baleful Cox regarded him. Don't think so, huh? Both grinned, and Lucius took him home. Thank you.